Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Transitions podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn, and I am here with
Margie DeLynn. Hey, everyone.
And we're super excited to have you with us today. The date is February 7th, 2017. It's high noon. We have a couple announcements that we'd like to make. First of all, thanks again to everyone for joining us. And a few quick announcements. We've had some great events, Mormon Transition events in the past several months and years. We've got a few that are coming up. These events are dedicated to supporting people in their transition, whether they're believing, active in the church, semi-active, leaving the church. They're all about healing and growth and support in a Mormon transition. A couple just ones coming up we want to let you know about. March 10th through 12th, we're having a retreat in Salt Lake City. It's going to be fantastic. It's 2.5 days. There'll be karaoke. Margie and I are going to be hosting. We'll have some special guests, and we're really thrilled about that. So please join us in Salt Lake City in March if you can. We also have Denver, Fort Collins, Colorado coming up May 4th through 5th. And then we have Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Australia all planned throughout the year. So please go to mormontransitions.org/events to see what events are available. We also have other events that we're planning, and we'll get to that in just a second. We continue to have a few tricklings of people signing up as donors to Mormon Transitions to support this event. We really appreciate people who are willing to give a monthly donation, $10, $20 a month. If you enjoy these programs, if you find them useful, then we really appreciate those of you who are able to support it financially, because your contributions go to support the equipment, the internet broadband, the software that we need to use, and it goes to support the Open Stories Foundation, which is sort of how all of this is made possible. So please support us if you can, and thanks to all those who have. We always like to have panelists who are believing and active members of the church. So if you want to be a panelist and you are a believing LDS church member, please reach out to us at mormontransitions@gmail.com. And also, again, we invite you to send us emails or to make comments on our blog page at mormontransitions.org. Email us at mormontransitions@gmail.com. But we love to get your feedback. We love to get ideas for topics. We love to get all sorts of input from you. And so we ask you to please, please contribute. We want this to be a collaboratory event to make sure that it meets your needs. One final thing, last week we experimented with this software called Zoom. We are using the Zoom for panelists, but we've decided that we're going to just kind of mainstream all our listeners into Facebook Live. So for those of you who are trying to join us live or wondering what happened with Zoom, just know that we're going to cut Zoom out for now in terms of the listener experience, and we'll just look for your comments on Facebook Live. So right now, we're monitoring the Facebook live stream. There's 17 people there, and we look forward to any questions or comments you have on that Facebook live stream. With that, boy, all those introductions.
Yeah.
How are you feeling today?
Good. I'm feeling all right.
Yeah?
Getting over a cold, but I'm happy to be here. I'm excited for the topic today.
Are you excited about this topic?
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
It's always nice to have you, sweetie pie. Let me kiss your cheek.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So I am now going to introduce the topic. Today, we are super excited to introduce the topic of healthy sexuality in a Mormon transition. And to be honest, I think that the principles that we talk about are good regardless of where you are, whether you're in a church or out of a church, whether you're an Orthodox believing Mormon or not. I think we're going to be just covering part one of a series of discussions around principles of healthy sexuality. But particularly, we're going to target maybe some instances where that are targeted towards the transitioning Mormon experience. And because we like to bring on only the cream of the cream panelists as guests, we are super excited to have with us two dear friends and colleagues and supporters. So I am thrilled, Margie and I are thrilled to welcome Natasha Helfer Parker and Kristin Marie Bennion to Mormon Transitions podcast. Both of them are not only licensed mental health professionals, but they're also certified sex therapists. And not everyone in the Mormon realm who talks about sexuality is actually a licensed sex therapist. That's an elite, very very high quality and important certification that Natasha and Kristin both bear. So with that, we want to give our guests a chance to kind of introduce themselves. So I'm going to have each of you just quickly tell us where you live, what your day job is, and one fun thing about you. So Natasha, welcome to Mormon Transitions, and why don't you kick us off?
All right, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Let's see, where do I live? Wichita, Kansas. I am the founder of Symmetry Solutions, which is an online practice where I'm trying to have hand-picked providers that will help with issues just like this: faith transitions, sexuality, LGBT concerns, a lot of the issues that I tend to see in my practice, and I can't see everybody, and I want to be able to offer more affordable rates and availability. So I'm really excited about that project. And something fun about me, I just went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C., and that was amazing. And I went with Gina Colvin of A Thoughtful Faith, so that's fun just in of itself, and we had a great time.
Super
we love
fun.
Gina, and
Yes.
we love you, Natasha, so thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
All right, Kristin, you're next. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Kristin.
There it is.
There you go. Yeah.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I currently live in Bluffdale, Utah, and I work as a full-time therapist. I own Intimate Connections Counseling in Orem, and I also apparently am a glutton for punishment because after 7 years practicing, I returned for my PhD last year in human sexuality. So I kind of have 2 full-time jobs right now. That's what I do in the day and night. So yes.
Day and night.
And this.
Well, welcome, Kristin. We're thrilled.
you.
Oh, keep going. Keep going.
Something interesting. I find it interesting. My favorite place in the whole wide world is Lake Powell. So that.
Yeah. You're also, you and Natasha both are epic karaoke participants. So I think that's worth mentioning as well.
I love karaokeing with no one else more than Natasha.
That I will not take offense to that. I think you're both amazing. I just kind of, meander.
You do more than meander.
And Natasha and Kristin have both joined us as sort of colleagues on many of our past Mormon Transitions retreats, and they've been fabulous. And that's where we have all karaoke'd. So we hope, Natasha and Kristin, to have you guys join us soon for another retreat or workshop, and maybe to sponsor you guys in some more events of your own. So we'll see in the coming months and years what we can do together more, but
I'd love it.
We're thrilled to have you with us. So thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so the way that we're going to structure this, we've already received way more questions than we could possibly tackle today. Plus, we want to take some live questions as well, and so we're not even going to try to pretend that this is going to be a comprehensive discussion. Here's how it's going to work. I've asked Natasha and Kristin both to lay out some principles of healthy sexuality that they think are particularly useful, not just to people in general, but to people in a Mormon transition. And so we're going to basically cover those principles one by one in this discussion. And we're not going to try and cover them all. We're planning to do this as a 2-part series next week, February 14th, on Valentine's Day. I think we're going to do part 2 of this discussion. And we've already got additional discussions after that. We had a great question from a listener that wants us to cover being single and Mormon and sexuality. And I think that would be a fabulous topic to cover as well. So with that,
Along with, I know a lot of people have asked questions about talking about sex with their children too, amidst transitioning, how that can change. So that's another topic.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
So
a lot there.
we've got a lot of, we'll be doing a lot of sex talk over the next 12 months. And I think that's a good thing. But today we're going to begin introducing a few concepts. And as we talk about these concepts, we want to invite our listeners to post comments and questions on the Facebook page. And we will incorporate your questions and comments to the extent that we have time and that they're kind of directly relevant. We'll incorporate them into our discussion. That's one of the fun things about having a live conversation. All right, so Natasha, we're going to start off with you with your first point, and we're going to dive in. And the point that you put first for wanting to discuss is reclaiming authority. And I'm just dying to hear what you mean by that and why that's important in this context. So please launch in.
Okay, so from, I think, a Mormon perspective, we have all been raised in this space where we have had to make sense of opposing principles. And that starts right from the get-go with our story of the Garden of Eden and this idea that we have obedience and we have personal revelation as, I think, the two principles that are represented in that story. And in Mormonism, we do something kind of unique from other Christian traditions in that both of those choices were seen as positive or able to be important. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, our culture tends to be very obedience focused. I don't know why we like Satan's plan of parenting more than Heavenly Father's. I'm talking all in our Mormon language, right? So bear with me here, but this is kind of how many of us, I think, were raised or with these ideas. And so, where Satan wants things to be, scripted and understood from the get-go, and you just kind of follow the plan and we're all going to make it. And I think that this is kind of how a lot of people like to parent, not just Mormons. We like to be authoritarian and we like to have the rules and have things be clear with our kids. And there's definitely room for that. There's room for those kinds of concepts. But we're less comfortable with ambiguity, and we're less comfortable with the idea of allowing people their own personal authority around their thoughts, their beliefs, their actions, etc. Mm-hmm. And when your kiddo is 3 or 4, that's okay. When your kiddo's 15 or 16, that's less okay. And when your kiddo's 45, really not okay, right? So this is what a lot of us are dealing with. And so I think that many of us within the church system, whenever it was that maybe you've transitioned away from the church, most of us, I think, who are listening probably did that in our adulthood. And so at some level in our adulthood, we were still giving very much our sexual authority over to the church. Because out of all the different things that the church controls, like tithing or what we eat or how we wear our clothes or et cetera, sex is a big one. It's a big one that it controls. And so I think what I mean by reclaiming authority is stepping into our adulthood and into a more normative developmental tract that we've been stunted in, and that we have been acting like adolescents or even pre-adolescents at times. And now I think one of the opportunities that a transition offers people is this ability to reclaim, re-step into our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, wherever we're at, and start making some of those decisions more on our own. And this was very much like my blog. When I started my blog, I mean, these are the questions I got from adult members. Is it okay for me to have oral sex? Is it okay for me to have this position? Is it okay for me to buy a sex toy? So I get this sense that many members want permission to explore their sexuality from an authority figure versus really understanding how to reclaim that on their own.
Right. Totally important. Yeah.
So I love that idea. I think this is a great place to start. And I think we've actually touched on this theme, not just in the context of sexuality, but just broader. It's not just about sexuality. We need to reclaim our authority. It's about all sorts of different things. And I think I totally get what you're talking about as it relates to getting permission from, let's just say, a bishop or a stake president. And I think that, or a mission president, if you're a missionary in the, you know, in the mission field or whatever it is, I can totally see, number one, that that's a big issue. And number two, that even if you're now unorthodox or non-believing, that wiring is hard to break. A question that comes to mind is that, does that principle apply even in other contexts? Let's just say you no longer want to ask permission of the bishop or stake president. Let's just say it's a married couple that's trying to figure things out. Are there other contexts where authority is relevant just between an unorthodox or non-believing husband and wife? And if so, give us some examples of how that might play out in the bedroom.
Well, I think that authority is something we all look to. And again, it's not all bad or all good. It's part of why I went into sex therapy training. I wanted to learn from authorities. I started wondering about my own biases. I started wondering about my own limitations in my training. And so I started my sex therapy certification process with this idea of, I hope they tell me what healthy sexuality is. And I didn't get that. I didn't get that answer per se. Mm-hmm. What I got is a lot more questions. Now there are some 6 basic principles that I hope we do cover today that the World Health Organization has come up with, that most sex professionals would agree are healthy principles around sexuality. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm trying to say there's several authorities. There's scientific authority, right? There's elder authority, right? So the elders, the mothers or fathers that have gone before us, and some of the things that they have to teach us. There's political authorities. Obviously, sexuality is legal, has a lot of legal ramifications still in most countries. So there's definitely an important relationship, I think, that we have with authority. At the same time, we have had a very imbalanced relationship, usually as Mormons, with authority in our own sexuality and giving that authority away. Not because we're dumb, but because in essence it was required of us in order to be part of the system.
Yeah.
So talk about, let's just say there's a husband, and Kristin, we can bring you in on this. Please feel free to jump in. Let's just say there's a husband and wife. They're either unorthodox members now or out of the church. Talk about some other instances where authority, in people that you've worked with, authority can come into play. One example for me is we're used to a patriarchy where men are in charge and women are, in theory, supposed to be submissive. Can you talk about real life examples where this principle of authority has become an important issue between an unorthodox or post-Mormon married couple? Kristin, you're shaking your head. Do you have some examples that come to mind?
Well, I think because of my own bias of being a sex therapist, the first thing coming to my mind is often couples come and all of a sudden I am getting this feeling that I'm the new authority. And so I think my bias, and I'll say this up front, this is an overgeneralization, but it's my hope that we can spend some time improving your own self-awareness and regain some authority that is already within you, mm-hmm. and to maybe feel less drawn to be asking, is it okay or am I normal? Which is so normal in and of itself to be asking that. But to really start giving some attention to, what do I believe? What is okay with me? What are my preferences? How do I negotiate this with my partner if I'm partnered? These are really, a lot of my clients feel quite underdeveloped in this area because it's been outsourced for so long. The ultimate authority has been outsourced for so long. And so that was the first one that came to my mind.
I love it. So for either of you, what are some specific examples of people that you know about or have worked with where they had questions or concerns around authority, and how did you see them resolve that in a healthy, positive way as they work through it? I want to try and be as practical as we can.
So 2 examples I would give as far as how I see patriarchy often play out is the typical way, right, that we would think, where the man has the power. And so now they transition away and maybe he's the high libido partner and he's maybe putting pressure to start opening up a marriage, let's say. Okay. So that's in essence, and now the wife who's played a more submissive role is not aware enough of herself or aware enough to be able to place boundaries in a correct way. So that's maybe one example of typical, what you think of typical patriarchy. However, my experience with most Mormons that I've worked with, is that because we have this benevolent patriarchy where women are so great and wonderful and fragile and beautiful, is that pure, is that women have a lot of power, especially sexually, and that men really have not been allowed the right to have sexual needs, desires. So again, I'll say stereotypically, if he's the high libido partner and maybe he wants to explore something that would be fun, like erotica or a sex toy, and she's not interested in that, it's very easy to shut that down within the Mormon system because, you're perverse or you're degenerate or your natural man is taking over and you're not spiritual enough. But that can also transfer over to transitioning couples where it's like, well, now I'm a feminist and I don't have to do anything you want me to do. And I don't, get the hell away from me type of attitude. And so the negotiation between partners isn't necessarily something that's that they know how to navigate very well. So I see the patriarchal kind of disaster playing out both ways, where you have the typical man taking over and the woman acquiescing, or you have the superficial woman power coming out, that has ramifications for their relationship as well.
And what are just some basics for helping a couple through this? Let's just say it's either the man trying to run roughshod, he feels liberated now and he wants to conquer the world sexually, so to speak, and he's trying to run roughshod over his wife, or the wife who now feels liberated and she's maybe even and maybe even realistically so, just like hyper conscious about patriarchy and control, and maybe even overcorrecting in a way that isn't good for the marriage. What are some basic principles that you use to help a couple through that? Or even examples of when you've worked with a couple and helped them negotiate that. Does anything come to mind in terms of just a sort of a roadmap for how a couple works through that disparity or impasse around authority?
Sure. And I'll start, and then Kristin, I promise I'll be quiet. I can overtalk. So I think, where I start with most people and most issues, even non-sexual issues, is normalization and understanding of the problem to begin with, right? So let's figure out what the patterns are. Let's figure out where these patterns come from. Let's figure out how to stop blaming each other. It's so easy to get stuck in that it's your fault, either you're broken, you're the problem, or it's my fault and I'm the problem. And neither one of those are usually super helpful, because it's usually, even in subconscious ways, much more interrelated than that. That's just kind of a simplistic way that we try to make sense of issues. And most of us are not motivated by shame or fear. So we might be for a short amount of time, but it doesn't really motivate long-term change. So self-blaming or partner blaming isn't the greatest motivator. So we really want to step back and go, well, let's look at these two kids that got married, when we were 21 and 25, and let's see about some of the issues that we were dealing with and some of the meanings that we made out of those issues, and how we got kind of stuck in those patterns. And here we are 15 years later, maybe, dealing with some of those same things. And can we empathize with those younger versions of ourselves? And can we understand how we could have gotten to this particular place where we're struggling and hurting, and maybe have even started driving wedges between us? And so we want to be really empathic towards ourselves, towards each other. And then what, if anything, could we shift? Is there meaning that we can shift? Is there behavior that we can shift? Is there a process that we can notice that's different going forward? And so through these little steps, and it's hard to everybody's so different. It's so unique with every couple, but it's similar in that sense of all of a sudden those baby steps and those little shifts can really start propelling things forward, like the snowball, where it seems little at first, but then all of a sudden it's really rolling in a good direction.
I love it.
I love that idea. And I love the idea about bringing awareness to our own stories around sex, like our own thoughts and feelings as we grew up and our own relationship that way. And then also our stories with our partner, becoming more aware of like, how would we define our story? How would we tell our story? Because I feel like not only for awareness, but that it's empowering. It's empowering to be able to get to a place too, to say, okay, and that's where we are right now. And if we were to pick up the pen and now consciously, beginning, what would we want? Like, I just see that as such an empowering step to become truly aware and own it and really show that empathy for each other within our own paradigms and stories. So love that.
Love it. Kristin, what would you add? What would you add, Kristin, to what Natasha has shared with us?
I would just add that I will tie both of what Natasha and Margie what they said with the boat. That I think a lot of the process is just learning to call it out. When in doubt, call it out. I'll say that all the time. Let's get really skillful at being able to talk about this stuff. And of course, we really need to be able to know what the heck is going on within ourselves, but and then to be able to migrate that with our partner. Developing awareness of what Natasha and I talk about often, of a sexual template. Where are all of our hesitations coming from? Are those something that just feels, true to me, or can it possibly be from some of the scripting that I was raised with? And let's just get really good at talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of shaming a partner because they're, which I see this unfortunately too often, of shaming a partner for either way, because they are just trying to now do everything because, all options are on the table. Or maybe one of the partners is saying, I don't know, I feel like this is right for me, and it might resemble the Orthodox way of practicing, Mormon sexuality. And the other partner is really having a hard time honoring that because they're assuming that it's still influenced by the church authority. And so I think getting really good and skillful with learning to talk about it is huge.
And it's so, aren't we taught sometimes as Mormons, or not taught, but just the messages we pick up around sexuality so early, it's that it's dangerous, that it's scary, stay away, but then also that it's something that we kind of hush hush, you don't want to, and don't we just kind of unintentionally pick up this sense that it's scary and probably not healthy or good to talk about it? I love that quote you said, when in doubt, call it out. But isn't that so non-intuitive, Kristin, for many of us who were raised sort of having never had sex until we were married, and then with only one partner for the rest of our lives,
And to validate it times two, when in doubt, that feels weird. Let's not call that out. Let's move away from that. But with sexuality, on top of it,
right.
Like I have clients that have never said the words they say when they come, they've never articulated these experiences ever.
What are some of the words they don't want to say, and what are some of the words they use as replacement?
Man. Make me say that. I'm just kidding. No, even just anatomy, talking about a clitoris or a vulva, or a penis.
Those say privates.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever had a woman tell me anything about her vulva.
Mm-mm.
Or a man tell me about his wife's vulva.
Mm-mm.
Right.
So having a place to start talking about that, this is part of being a human. Can we embrace that?
Mm-hmm.
That this is a part of your body, and it's okay.
Right.
Talk about
And even with men, nobody's ever told me about their scrotum or other, they haven't.
Right.
Natasha, I'd like to tell you about my scrotum.
Thank you, John.
Is it safe? Can we talk about?
We can talk about your
He's such a revolutionary, always pressing boundaries.
Natasha, tell us about your vulva. We want to know.
She has a puppet.
I do have a puppet. Well, and oftentimes, and I'll say, like, maybe this is TMI, but I'll often say, even in my presentations, that my vulva is usually enlarged when I'm talking about sex, which it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I'm about to jump anybody or that I'm like hot for John or Kristin or Margie, although I think you're all wonderful. And it just is because it's a topic that as soon as I start talking about it, there's a certain level of arousal that happens to me physiologically.
Right.
Sexually
Nothing more than that.
Right. Sexually relevant stimuli.
Right.
Body doesn't know you're Mormon or post-Mormon or whatever. It's just doing what it's been trained to do.
It's wiring.
I love it. Okay.
And
So
I would encourage anybody who's listening to us right now to maybe take a moment and think about what your body is doing as we're joking, as we're talking, as we're giving information. Like, what are my genitals doing? What's my abdomen doing? You know, what's my heart rate doing? All those things can be really informative.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So healthy communication, exploration. It sounds like working with the sex therapist can be really useful. And it sounds like when in doubt, spit it out, share it, talk about it, and even get comfortable with awareness, really good self-awareness around your body, around your partner, and get comfortable talking about it. What do you want to add, sweetie?
And also, it sounds like reclaiming your own voice amidst that process of sort of moving away from authority and being aware that we may still keep some of those structures of looking for the right way, or what is approved of, or what is healthy, or what is, as we explore maybe through other means, that we're all there. It can come with us, I guess what I could say, to look for that authority. We just move it away from maybe the religious authority to then like a scientific authority, or which is probably all part of the process. But that's what I'm hearing you saying too. Yes?
Yeah.
Yep, it's valid.
Well, and I would add, you know, a lot of this goes back to differentiation skills, you know, so this idea, which again is so applicable to so many aspects of our relationships, but how comfortable am I tolerating difference between us?
Yes.
You know, and so especially when it comes to erotic differences, you know, I think it's kind of fun when I hear the younger people saying, don't yuck my yum, right? Don't put down, just because I think it's hot or erotic or I'm turned on by that, don't make me feel bad about that. Right. And I'd also say, don't yum my yuck. You know, so in other words, don't make me feel bad that I'm not turned on by something. And I think this happens a lot, kind of like what Kristin was alluding to, is that it's very classic for the transitioner, the high libido transitioner, whether it's the female or the male, to now be like, yeah, you're caught up in the old patterns, and if you were just more liberated or less rigid or all those things. And it really just may be, some of us are just more vanilla than others. Some of us are, I mean, this happens outside of religious couples or transitioning couples, that there's huge differences in what we bring to the table as far as what turns us on to begin with. And fate transitions may open up a window that you haven't explored yet, and that can be really fun, but it doesn't necessarily change an erotic template.
Right.
So you're not going to all of a sudden be turned on by something that never turned you on before, and probably will never turn you on to begin with. So there is always room for growth and change, and there's a spectrum there, but there's also limits to, it's almost like orientation. You know, there's certain, I mean, some of us will be more fluid in that, but some will be pretty fixed. And so you're not really going to change your sexual orientation just because you've changed your faith, your religious beliefs. And that goes for erotic templates too.
The only thing that comes to my mind there, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Sometimes I've come across clients where, let's just say, the woman never allowed herself to even consider the possibility that she might be bisexual or lesbian. And so it was just never something she even entertained as a possibility. Once her faith transition happened, she felt free to actually be open, and found that she had actually suppressed quite a bit of romantic feelings and desires to experience with another female. Now, how that's played out in the marriage is something that the couple would talk about, but that's the only exception. Yes, your template isn't going to change, but maybe sometimes there's less of an awareness about how you're wired because you didn't allow yourself to even go certain places. That's
the trick, is that oftentimes it's not helpful when your spouse is deciding whether or not you're repressing your erotic template, or you are, or that's just how you're wired. So you'll never know really, okay, well, could I have liked that if I hadn't been raised Mormon? Or was that just never in my erotic template to begin with, right? And so that's what you're talking about, John, is self-awareness. It comes from a self-awareness. But if you have a partner shaming you because now all of a sudden, you're not following some trajectory that they're following because of the faith transition, that's where I'm saying it's complex and it's hard to know. This is also the issue with asexuality, right? So asexual orientation people are saying, leave us alone. We don't want to be sexual. Whereas most of the time, the professional community has been saying, no, there's something you're repressing. Everybody is sexual. So you need to figure out what happened or what's wrong. And the asexual community is really pushing back on that and saying, why do I have to be the broken one to fit your paradigm, right? And so it gets really complex. And this is why self-authority and communication is so important.
I love that, because it plays into other aspects of the transition journey as well. So it reminds me of what Kristin was saying earlier, which is a kind of an awakening of your own voice within sexuality, that self-awareness and connecting to yourself actually in process. Yeah.
A question occurs to me that I think we probably should have began with. Is there any way to correlate or associate a faith transition, which can mean just becoming a little more progressive or liberal, or it can mean leaving religion altogether? We want to sort of define a transition as being that entire spectrum. Kristin, I'll ask you first, then Natasha, you can add. Does experiencing a faith transition correlate with at least the potential for improved sexuality and sexual experiences? What's been your experience? Is it like, wow, this is actually a great opportunity? Is there an upside to experiencing a faith transition as it relates to sexuality from your experience, Kristin?
Well, I would definitely frame it that way. I think that's the way I would try to frame that there are many benefits that can come from this process, and discovering your own, rediscovering or discovering for the first time your own authority, especially within the realm of sexuality, because there's so much to work with there, can create some really thorough and beautiful growth that otherwise might not have, we don't know, but otherwise might not have had that opportunity. And so I think that I definitely would make sure people know that it's tough work, but it's some of the most meaningful work that can ever happen in my experience. And so, yeah.
Love it. How about you, Natasha?
Well, I would completely second that. I mean, I think anytime we take authority back to a personal place, there's a lot of room for opportunity. At the same time, I will also say that there are people who faith transition into more conservative venues. And I have worked with many, especially trauma victims that come from really chronically toxic homes, where becoming a Mormon convert opened up their sexuality in ways that they never imagined, because now all of a sudden sexuality was being treated as something sacred and something that you could have boundaries around and something that was meant as a gift from God. So I just want to make room, right, for the possibility that there's growth regardless of which way people go. And there's also room for a lot of havoc and a lot of unhealthy patterns regardless of which direction people go. But we don't want to just automatically say, oh, we're so enlightened and wonderful because we're transitioning away and look at us and our sexuality now. I mean, yes, And I've also seen a lot of risk-taking and unhealthy ways of doing the transitions that really kind of can ruin relationships or create a lot of havoc, because it's a tumultuous time. Faith transitions, regardless of which way you're going, are tumultuous times and times of change. And it's exciting and it's growth producing. And sometimes we take risks and hopefully we learn from those. And those can eventually be growth things as well.
Yeah.
Have either of you seen like just Orthodox Mormon couples that actually have super great sex lives? I think I know the answer, but I just thought it'd be fun to ask.
Yeah.
Kristin?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I was one of them for a while.
Yeah. My favorite clients ever are the BYU students, like, you know, because they're younger and they just want to that didn't go well, so let's go talk to someone about this. And it's like, they're so fun to work with. So fun. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, authority's been a fun topic to talk about. And let's move, Kristin, to the first topic that we saw you list.
Okay.
What we saw you list was inform, educate self on sexuality, seek credible resources, develop sexual template. Tell us about what that means.
That was kind of a random jumble of topics. And we've kind of touched base a lot on some of those already. But in terms of developing awareness of a sexual template, I don't know if the whole audience really is aware of that, or that kind of that term used in this process. But Natasha and I talk about it quite a bit. And one of the things I try to help most of my clients come to an awareness of is that there are erotic things that we are going to be drawn toward that are specific to us. And some people might share it and some others won't. And often it's not politically correct. It doesn't make sense with our core values. A lot of times it can be very conflicting. And so developing awareness of that and having kindness and compassion toward yourself and your partner and not needing them to be exactly like you can be beautiful and can be really bonding to walk through those discoveries together.
What are some of the dimensions of a template? Tell us again some of the dimensions of a sexual template.
And Natasha, you can jump in too, because we can name them. Just sexual orientation, frequency of connecting intimately. And I don't want to just emphasize intercourse, because that's a big trap that a lot of folks in long-term relationships fall into, of it's penis, vagina, intercourse, or nothing at all. And so we lose out on a whole array of ways of connecting and sharing pleasure together. And so just there are favorites and preferences of all within those categories that can be named and embraced and maybe shelved for once a year. That's fine, you know, but yeah.
There's all kinds of, there's fetishes, there's people who cross-dress, there's people who have fantasies about orgies or threesomes, or really have fantasies about oral sex or anal sex. There's different positions, there's rape fantasies, there's all kinds of things that really disturb people sometimes, like, why does this turn me on, or why does this turn you on, and who am I married to?
Right.
And so it's, violence and sexuality has been part of the narrative around sexuality for forever. So there's a general, eroticness about either being submissive or being dominant. We have the whole BDSM community, the kink community that plays in a lot.
Tell us what that acronym means, BDSM.
So BDSM is bondage, dominance,
sadomasochism,
and masochism. Right. So basically we're either
sadism and masochism.
Yeah. So it's either hot to be submissive or dominant, or it's hot to inflict pain or to have pain inflicted on myself. And of course the BDSM community is very much about consent. So, and you have to also understand that the threshold between pain and pleasure is very There's that threshold where with enough arousal, something that's hurting me this minute is not hurting me this minute, right? So basic nipple stimulation, for example. If you just grab my nipple right now, I'd be like probably punching your face, right? But if you grab my nipple and you're the right person and I'm aroused at a certain point, then all of a sudden that becomes pleasurable, right? So there's this concept of pain and pleasure that is very different for each body. So the BDSM and kink community are very much about playing out those narratives and those roles. Something that's very vanilla type kink is the typical spanking, right? Like you'll be doing something and there'll be a little spank on the butt and woo, you know. So that's kind of a vanilla kink type of moment versus handcuffs and whips and chains, right? So all of those can be fun too. So I'm just saying there's a huge spectrum. And of course, these days, there's a huge industry supporting all of those different spectrums. So you can find all kinds of things. There's, of course, erotic material, right? So sexually explicit films, which most people call pornography, which causes all kinds of issues, usually within marriages. And we see a lot of the language around addiction in that regard. But for us, for people like Kristin and I, these are all parts of erotic templates, things that turn us on. There's usually good reasons why these things turn us on. There are scripts that we've been following, like I said, for millennia on many of these issues. And now it's up to me and my partner or partners that I'm deciding to be sexual with to decide how we're going to navigate those differences, what areas we're going to explore or not explore together, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't demean you or me.
Okay, I love it. So let's talk practically now around sexual templates, because I was going to say I'm aroused. No, because I'm interested in exploring this. So
Normal.
can you please, okay, so let's just assume that many of us were sort of, you know, sex once a week, missionary position, no oral sex, sort of.
And end
Mormons.
oriented, very end oriented, right? It's about the orgasm, or it's very functional.
Did you orgasm? Did you orgasm? Okay.
High five.
And I think that's even probably ambitious for many Mormon couples, even necessarily making sure that both were stimulated. But and this goes back to authority a little bit, because when you start talking about things like anal and oral and BDSM, what comes into my mind is like Howard Stern, and my Mormon mind is like, this is naughty, bad, dirty stuff. This is that's what my Mormon brain does. And
look at him being aware.
I know.
The awareness, people.
I'm kind of excited because I'm being compared to Howard Stern.
I was about to say, for those of you who like Howard Stern, you're okay. You're normal.
Well, I don't invoke Howard Stern meaning that that's bad. I mean it as a contrast to the Mormon orthodoxy of like being something like, you know, out there. So it's not actually a slam on Howard Stern, other than to say the Mormon brain, that's like something very foreign and other and maybe bad.
You bet.
And so can you guys give examples of, you know, of people that you've worked with where they were Orthodox and they discovered something in their template that was actually very meaningful and useful to them, that was healthy, that maybe would challenge a bit of our taboos or concerns around things that probably are triggering. I mean, honestly, I think most of our audience, and you guys can comment if you agree with me, when they hear anal, when they hear BDSM, it's like what their emotions would do would be to recoil. And I'm not saying you have to talk about those things specifically, but can you give us some examples of some individuals or couples who were just mainstream people exploring their sexual template, and where they discovered something about their sexual template that became very enhancing for them individually and for them as a couple? Just some real world examples.
So Okay, so can we start actually by just going over the 6 principles of sexual health? Because I think that this is really, really important, because what's going to be really great for one couple is going to be harmful for another. And so I think just by laying out these principles, we start off on a good footing. So these are 6 principles that the World Health Organization agreed would be good to put under the guise of sexual or healthy sexuality. Number 1 is consent. So that's pretty straightforward, right? We're both agreeing to be in this relationship. We're both agreeing to whatever behavior we're wanting to be. Number 2 is non-exploitative, which is helpful for the consent, because you can consent to something that you're consenting to because you're feeling exploited. So Mormon polygamy, for example, is a good historical example of that, where there was consent, but because your salvation was kind of on the line, right? So I'm not sure that it was super authentic consent. Does that make sense? And so I think even couples need to be careful about this. It's, well, yeah, my wife consented to this or my husband consented to this, but under what guise? And I'm okay with discomfort, because growth requires discomfort.
Right.
But it's different to say I'm uncomfortable but willing, versus I'm feeling that if I don't do this, there's going to be repercussions to our relationship that I'm not willing to face. Does that make sense? So that's a little bit of that. Protection from unwanted pregnancy and disease. That's pretty forthcoming. That's probably the number 1 sexual education we get is around that. Honesty. So can we be honest and transparent with one another? Shared values. So do we have a shared sense that this is falling under the values? And for a lot of Mormons, this is where it really becomes this principle of the value here is that we want to enhance our sexuality. That's the shared value, not so much what we're doing to do that, right? Which can fall back into those, oh, that's naughty behavior. But so we'll talk a little more about that. And then mutual pleasure. So we're both having pleasure. Are we prioritizing both of our pleasure? And is pleasure equal orgasm? Because this is another really sweet problem that I see with Mormon men in particular is, honey, did you have your orgasm? Are you having your orgasm? I want to make sure you're having your orgasm. You're going to have an orgasm, right? And finally she's like, what the hell? Like, I don't want to have an orgasm. Right? So it's like he's prioritizing her pleasure so much that it's not really organic or helpful, because although it comes from a really good space to want to prioritize that, because I think a lot of men have heard, boy, men don't care about women's pleasure. Well, I don't want to be that kind of man. I want to care about my wife's pleasure, but now it's a pressured pleasure, and that doesn't help either. So how do we define mutual pleasure? So anyway, I want to just lay that out as a basic foundation to the question.
Please, and Natasha, please send us a link to those principles, and we'll include them in the show notes so that we can share those with our listeners and refer to them in our future episodes. Thank you for laying that groundwork. But I want to make sure each point we cover, we get practical. And so let's now apply that to examples that you know of people who have explored the sexual template and had good things happen as a result.
Okay, so for example, and this can even be with a practicing Mormon couple. You have a woman who's anorgasmic. She's been married for 15, 20 years, has never experienced an orgasm.
And anorgasmic means never had an orgasm.
Right, never had an orgasm. And so they decide that they're going to start several things. So one is that she's going to self-stimulate or masturbate, which has never been allowed before. That's naughty sexual behavior.
While they're together or when she's alone?
When she's alone.
Okay.
Because she's too self-conscious to do that in front of her partner at this point. Some feel opposite. Some would rather do it with their partner than do it alone, because they feel too self-conscious doing it alone. So it just depends.
Right.
And they're going to start looking at some sexually erotic material as part of helping her become more aroused.
Like
and be
what?
In tune with
like
arousal.
what? Like something on Pornhub? Like what?
Possibly on Pornhub. I have other links that I can give them, or websites where you can go to find things that people feel comfortable with. But yeah, they have to go explore.
Okay, share those with us in the afterwards
Okay,
so that we can
I'm
add
gonna have
them
to
to
get
the
all my
show notes.
resources.
Okay. All right.
So that's two naughty Mormon behaviors, right? Masturbation and looking at erotica, that now even a Mormon couple or a transitioning couple will say, you know what, because our shared value is we want to grow and sexually have better experiences than what we've been having. These are things that now we're not going to see as bad anymore.
So how did those two things help the couple?
Well, so first of all,
talk about how they got introduced, and then how the arc, the narrative of their progression as those things got introduced, how they helped.
Okay, and I'll let Kristin take over in a minute, so I'm not talking the whole time. But we know through some basic sex therapy work that people who tend to know their bodies, know how to touch their bodies, know how to pleasure themselves, are much then more capable of expressing that to their partners and allowing for that capacity to come forth. We are usually under the myth, especially in more traditional cultures, where our partner will awaken that for us. So we just kind of show up and here's my body and you're going to figure it out for me. And for some people that works. For a lot of people it doesn't, specifically for women. So we know that if she takes time to look at herself, so we might do a mirror exercise where she can become more comfortable with her genitalia, where she can touch herself and figure out, do I like this? Do I not like this? Sensate focus is another way to do this, through couples massage type exercises. So these are things that we know in the sex therapy field can help a woman reach orgasm. And along with that, erotic material. So getting in touch with her erotic template. Usually I'm in a white dress and he's going to take me and love me and hold me is not enough. Okay. I need to be like taken and rammed and, pushed. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, I just had an orgasm. Okay. So I didn't know that I could think about that kind of stuff. So erotica can kind of help in opening up the taboo, which we know that taboo and novelty is arousing. Stability and halos and angels, not so much. So sacred sex can be a beautiful idea, but not super practical.
And again, the erotica can be, are you saying it can be individual or watching it together?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's come back to that one. Kristin, why don't you jump in here? And if you, I would love to hear if you have an example or two of real people that you know about who, in exploring their sexual templates, some specific things that they added that became really helpful to them.
Okay. I have quite a few clients that have experienced pelvic pain, and quite a few clients, and I think that this is a group of people that don't get a lot of airtime, and more often than not, use of vibrator to increase pleasurable experiences around the genitalia can be clitoral stimulation, and also anal. Like I've had quite a few clients that was the only way they could experience at that time, given she was in treatment for with a pelvic floor physical therapist to help with the pelvic pain. That was a way that, through kind of setting aside the taboo, learned that they both really enjoyed it, and it was a way that they could still connect in that way without her needing to be exposed to pain. And that just was not what they wanted to experience. And I bring up that example because I do think that it applies to, what if medical, like we all have medical things happen here and there where our ideal experience maybe it's shelved right now. And what other ways can we share pleasure together? And often we need to challenge some of the things, otherwise the options are too narrow, and then the partnership loses the opportunity to connect together in that way.
Right. So I had a friend say to me, so that's a really good example. If somebody wanted to, this is again, not what my Mormon self would ever feel comfortable asking, but if somebody wanted to explore how to, like, the thought of anal sex just might sound either terrifying or gross or unsafe to somebody. Let's just say somebody wanted to learn about that. Kristin, you mentioned credible resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, Kristin, could somebody learn about how anal sex works in a healthy, safe, pleasurable way? What's a good resource?
One of my favorite go-tos, if I don't want to, because you can always try to contact someone like Natasha or myself, see if they'll send you a few, but most therapists try to have resources on their websites. There are also organizations that can have lists of good books and those types of things that can list how-tos and what to do and what not to do. Those are, I'm trying to give general, just to, because I think it's important to be selective with where you're going, not because of, it's going to get you, but, or taboo slippery slope type of fears, but just there's a lot of really crappy information out there that's just going to do more harm than good.
What are 2 or 3 of your go-to sort of references, either a book or a website or?
Do you have favorites?
Yeah, and then Natasha will have you answer the same question.
Emily Nagoski, Come As You Are.
What is that? Is that a book?
The new sexual science for female. Like, it's just revolutionary. It's
okay. Again,
wonderful.
That's a book called Come As You Are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay.
John,
right.
Go read it today.
We actually have it.
Oh, good. John. Yes.
We have it?
We do.
I had no idea.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Come As You Are. Oh my gosh, my mind's blanking.
Would Come As You Are explain a healthy, safe way to have anal sex?
I don't know if she goes over that.
Okay.
Guide to Getting It On is really good. Guide to Getting It On is like the Bible encyclopedia of every sexual act you could possibly imagine.
That's great.
Lacey Green does some really good work as far as short.
That's a YouTube channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's former Mormon, by the way.
Yes,
that's right. That's right. She is. And and I have so many different ones, but NatashaParker.org, I have always a recommendations list, so you can always look there.
Natasha's podcast, Mormon Sex Info.
Mormon Sex Info.
All right.
There's a great one on lubrication on that. So don't just get any lube. I found out there's a difference.
Perfect.
Very big.
Okay.
Check it out.
Okay, good. All right. So in the show notes, we'll include links both to your, Natasha, your website, but also any books or resources that might be useful.
Great.
Okay, good.
Let me give you one more example, because I think this is a fun one for transitioning folks. So a very typical regret that I hear from transitioning folks is, I only had one partner, right? I only had one sexual partner. And there's a percentage of transitioners that will dabble in the open marriage types of ideas or explorations. And sometimes that goes really well, and sometimes not. Again, thinking about those principles of healthy sexuality. If you do it dishonestly or behind your partner's back or exploitative, not so great. But sometimes those can be really fun experiences, and they can be temporary or longer term. But if you don't want to delve in that type of opening up your marriage, because there are risks associated to that as well, a fun exercise I have a lot of couples do is pretend play, fantasy. So they'll get a wig on or a different outfit that they've never worn before. They'll go to a bar, they'll order a drink, they'll flirt with people around them. All of a sudden, here comes the spouse and picks up their partner. And they go to a hotel and have casual sex that they never had before. One time, hot, casual sex. And they'll even leave the next morning in separate cars and see you later and play out the whole role model, the whole thing. And that can be really fun and exciting.
Have you seen that actually work?
Oh, yeah.
Role play? Because there's always and again, I'm being vulnerable here. There's always the analytical brain that's like, okay, we're just making this up, and we're acting, and it's silly, and is it just a matter of
into scrupulosity, John? Like, aren't you a little wired that way?
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, honestly though, like, is that something that for some people it's just not going to work, and for those who it has a possibility of working, what do you recommend to get someone over that, that sort of meta awareness that you're just kind of making this up, right? That it's not real. Kristin.
Yeah, well, it's fun. I mean, yeah, go ahead, Kristin.
Well, what I was going to say is the one Natasha just described is just the textbook. We're all smiling hearing her talk about it. What I think, it doesn't always have to be in person. It could be, role playing via text. It could be, email correspondence with the new mystery person, where the person who gets kind of stuck in their head has a second to just kind of, how do I want to respond? Like, what do I say to that? I don't know. And they're kind of getting used to sitting in that like ambiguity and ambivalence, which is super helpful to erotic energy. And so, yeah, just tweaking any example we give and say, well, what would maybe work? Let me try it this way, because I don't want to do that bar thing, and that's weird. Like she's gonna know I'm fake. Like we know that we're going to your mom's tomorrow, know. So, but like being playful, maybe not in person, is another option.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and for some people, it's good enough to just do it in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So you can get to a certain point of arousal and you're like, you know what? You up for some playtime? And all of a sudden you're just talking and you're like, so I'm taking you to a strip club, or I'm having sex with a different person, or who do you want to have sex with right now? And you just offer yourself in different ways like that. And so there can be things that just happen in the context of that moment of arousal. And it's okay if somebody says, no, I'm not up for that tonight, so let's just kind of keep doing what we're doing. That's fine too.
What if somebody were to be a skeptic and say, what's wrong with just being who you are? This idea of having a role play or to pretend that you're someone else, all of that is built on the assumption that who you are is not enough. What would you say to challenge that sort of skepticism?
I would say 50 years is a long time to be married to one person. And monogamy has its drawbacks. It has a lot of really great positives. Mm-hmm. And I think it's how you frame it. If you frame it like, oh, I have to be somebody else and I'm not enough, probably not the healthiest way to do that. But if it's like, hey, I want to have fun and pretend, I mean, that's what we go to the movies for, is we go and we pretend we're kind of in a different space for 2 hours out of our week to experience something we would never experience ourselves. So it's just playfulness. You don't have to. There's plenty of couples who have, quite frankly, very vanilla sex the majority of their life and are perfectly satisfied. So these ideas are really more for people who are struggling or want some creativity or are dealing with some of what we see, some of the typical issues that come up with regrets, with faith transitions and things of that nature.
And I wonder if some of it even comes out amidst sort of the template exploration, honestly, because it could be as easy as a difference between like, oh, for me, sex is profoundly connecting. That's what I look to it for. Whereas for, your partner, they're like, yeah, but I love fun and playfulness, or that these are some of maybe the differences or things to be explored, right, within a relationship.
And that's a great point, Margie, because there's a lot of couples like that. And if you're going to use that as a we're not compatible, instead of, I can be influenced by you and open up my sexual experiences, so that sometimes I am uncomfortable with the deep and connecting stuff, or sometimes I am uncomfortable with the playful, more rough and tough type of go at it. Right. But the fact that I partnered with you opens up my abilities to be uncomfortable. That's what I mean by being uncomfortable. Allowing yourself to be uncomfortable is different than forcing yourself outside of your erotic template.
Right. Got it.
And I want to say also, I would challenge the crap out of that, John, whenever I hear someone say, this is, why am I not enough? Because I think that is a narrative that is old school and a lot of Mormons experience. Like if I think that's a lot of like the concern with pornography rhetoric is it makes a partner feel like they're not good enough or something like that. And it just is so ingrained in our language that if heaven forbid a partner wants to have fun, or like in their own mind, they're just wanting to have fun. But the other partner is internalizing this because I'm not good enough. That's really not necessary. It doesn't necessarily have to be about that. But I like that you said that, John, because I think that's a really common comment I hear come up all the time.
It's a script that we've been given. I'm so glad you brought that up, Kristin, because the script is you have to be enough. This is the only place where you're allowed erotic energy is through this person. And in what other area of our lives do we do that? I mean, I go to a book club because my spouse doesn't want to read, right? Or I join a bicycle club because my spouse doesn't do that, right? There's some things we do together and that we enjoy together, and there's some things that I do on my own. So again, in the context of monogamy, we don't really do that. We don't say, okay, we'll go try that sexual thing with somebody else. So how do we, but we're not supposed to be our partner's 100% erotic template. It's an impossibility. So if you have that framework, you're automatically setting each other up for failure. And this is particularly true for women. Women have been given this template from day one. They need to be beautiful enough, sexual enough, hot enough, innocent enough, all those things to keep your partner's attention, sexual attention. And that's just, it destroys women, to have that type of pressure on ourselves. It's like, you have your sex brain, I have my sex brain. Let's figure out how to do some of this in a fun way together.
Right.
I love it.
Yep.
Okay, I'm loving this. So I'm gonna bring in some of our listeners' comments and questions now, and then we're gonna talk about pornography or erotica within a marriage. So just to read a few comments, Cam writes, "This is keep up this podcast going. Thanks for the info. This is definitely worth donating to." Thank you, Cam, for that plug. We appreciate it. Julie writes, "So great to be talking about this." Colleen writes, "Yes, please. Well done, Natasha. I'd love to see those." I think she means those principles of healthy sexuality. So a lot of comments from our listeners where they're loving what we're talking about and grateful for what we're talking about. Please keep those going. What I want to turn to now are some emails that we've received at mormontransitions@gmail.com. We want to encourage our listeners, if they are not comfortable sharing a question or a comment on the Facebook page, they can anonymously send email and we can answer. But a question we got from Nathan is, "I would assume you're already going to address porn, but please discuss healthy attitudes towards porn, how to arrive at something that works for both husband and wife, and how to keep jealousy at bay." So he goes on with the second part of the question, but I want to just keep it simple. So let me set this up a tiny bit more. Number one, I think we're all taught that porn is evil as Mormons. And number two, just taking Mormonism or even religion out of it, there are all these issues around, underage victims of porn, of sex trafficking, of it being demeaning to men or women and women, of again, you mentioned this, Kristin, of unhealthy expectations, that porn isn't real, that porn sets people up for unrealistic expectations, that it models many of the principles that in fact, Natasha, you said are important to healthy sexuality. So Kristin, I'll start with you and then Natasha, bring you in. Number one, how do we think about erotica or porn in a different way? Or should we? That's number one. Why should we? And then number two, how have you seen it successfully incorporated into a relationship? So maybe Kristin, I'll ask you to answer the first part, and maybe Natasha, you the second part.
So the first part was, have I seen it?
How do we think about pornography and erotica as anything other than evil and dirty and exploitative and dangerous and unhealthy?
Well, I would start with explaining that nobody has to like it. There are plenty of people that is not something that they would want any part with whatsoever. It doesn't turn them on. It's for whatever valid reasons, and I would for sure want to validate that and help them understand that. Reality is, as well, one of the things that we are not, that's not in the overall media around this right now is that the research is definitely backing up that it helps many couples enjoy a more full sex life together. It's pretty established. That doesn't mean that it's going to help everybody, you know? And so it also is in the research that it helps individuals access their erotic template, like Natasha was talking about, which can help the couple in the relationship together. And so a lot of what I do is a bit of that education piece, that this isn't saying that you couple need to do this at all. That is not what I'm in the business of saying. But it certainly is helpful to many couples nowadays.
Okay, so that's sort of a pragmatic argument to consider it for those who feel like they need or would like an enhancement. Mm-hmm. How do you help someone get over their concerns around the bad things about the porn industry? What would you say about that?
Natasha she's talked so much more about this part, but I mean, she can talk forever. But do you want to answer that one, Natasha?
Well, it's so complex. I mean, all of the things that you said could be said of Hollywood in general. You know, just expectations we have of body women size, expectations we have, you know, violent scenes that we see. You know, it's interesting how Europe is constantly like shocked at what we're comfortable with our 10, 11, 12-year-olds seeing as far as violence. But sexuality, oh my gosh. And I saw that with the Twilight series. This was fascinating to me, right? So we finally have marital sex, finally, you know, through the Twilight series. They wait until they're married. And so many Mormon mothers did not allow their daughters to see that last movie where they had marital sex, which was quite tamely done. But prior to that, there were beheadings and vampires, burnings and murders, and that was fine. They all got to go see those movies. Yeah. But marital sex by a Mormon author, nope, that was not okay. Fascinating to me. Are there issues with the porn industry? Of course there are. There's issues with all of these industries that have to do with sexuality, how women are depicted in the media, etc. However, we have to be very careful that we don't conflate our own value system with reality. So the fact is that most pornographic images are not considered violent. If you're coming from the perspective that just the fact that a woman would be depicted sexually as violent, well then it's all going to look violent to you. Most pornography is not done in sex trafficking types of ways. Are there some? Yes. And David Lay wrote a book called Ethical Porn for Dicks, which is not a super great title to recommend to a lot of my Mormon people. However, it has some really good information in it as far as being a smart consumer, you know, just like being a smart consumer about the clothing you wear and whether or not there's child labor involved, right? In other countries. I mean, there's so many different facets of our consumerism that may or may not be ethical. But yet when it comes to sexuality, we're so comfortable just writing an entire industry up. And I also find it very interesting as far as sex trafficking. That term has been kind of conflated to mean a lot of different things. For me, sex trafficking is, you know, a girl is grabbed who's a minor or even an adult woman, and she's put in a cage and now she's forced to have sex, you know, with people. That to me is like sex trafficking, slavery. It's really being used to describe runaways in our country. Now that's a huge problem. I'm not saying that's not a problem, right? So runaways, they're poor, they have no resources. They oftentimes turn to prostitution or things of that nature to survive. But to me, that's not sex trafficking. That is a poverty issue and an education issue. And, you know, so again, how do you define these things? So I think sometimes we can be overly dramatic in how we talk about things that tend to polarize the discussion instead of really help resources and actual change happen, because that's not changing anytime soon, and it's not a new story. Okay, that story is as old as humans are, as is sexually erotic material. So there's cave drawings with a man, jacking off, and the sperm is like shooting off. It's like this beautiful cave drawing. So it's been around for a long time. Now, granted, we are in a time where it's more accessible than ever before. That is true. Our young people have access, on their smartphones to images that back when we were their age would have been a lot harder to come by. And so we do need to be apt at educating our youth and educating ourselves. And the number one way to educate yourself about this is that it's entertainment. It's entertainment. It is not real. So do you drive your car the way the Fast and Furious drives their cars, right? Is that how we function as a society? No. So that's not how we have sex either. And so I think a lot of the issues that people have around sexually explicit material, and even the issues that are coming up with it being a porn crisis in Utah, and then the meanings that people put on it, and then the addiction kind of hoobla that makes everybody more anxious, which actually then causes more negative behavior, because guess what we do when we're anxious? We want to cope. And so if we feel like that's a bad habit, and we're feeling guilty about it, we're going to be more drawn to bad habits. I don't know about you, but I don't usually say, I'm stressed out, I'm going to eat some broccoli, right? And so I usually eat a donut because that's my issue. So it's not, when I'm stressed out, I'm not making good decisions. So, so I know I'm talking like, we probably could do like a whole thing just on this issue.
Okay, Margie has a follow-up, and then I have a follow-up.
Okay.
I think so too. And as you were talking, I had a couple thoughts, and I'm curious what you would think about it. But one thing that came to mind is just this idea amidst transitioning. I think when you accept a script and you've lived by that script, it takes time to sort of knock that sexuality tower down of what we've received as truth and slowly rebuild. I think it takes time to, number one, take in the information and really, decide for yourself, well, if I look at all these sites and this is what they're saying about masturbation, it kind of challenges this framework that I just sort of accepted before. Or what do a lot of sex therapists observe and science observe about, porn use? And so I think that takes time to do, but I think it's so important to sort of question and get some good information and allow it to really kind of settle within you. And then, like you say, kind of weigh it against your template and kind of how you experience connection or your sexual relationships. That was my first thing, is just sort of that process being so important. And then the second thing, I think sometimes because we are, well, I'll speak for myself, being very naive with regard to pornography, you have this idea that it's one thing. It's one, it is this one way of portraying women, one way of, when in fact, it's quite diverse. So if you have values around pornography, you don't want to see a woman devalued, or you don't like to see violent, you can actually choose that. You can actually look for a type of pornography that actually resonates more with you. One, let's say, with more relationship, or with more, nurturing, or more really intelligent, well scripted. I'm just saying that it's not just one thing, and that people can actually look for something that speaks to their value set. That's what I would say. What do you think about those two?
No, I totally agree. And I think that it's really important to understand the devaluing. Like, for example, because, I think John was the one who said, it would go against a lot of these sexual principles. Well, not necessarily. If I like to be ejaculated on, for example, and I'm consenting to that, and that's erotic to me, that's not demeaning. But maybe to somebody else who would see that on a tape, that would be very demeaning, because they don't particularly like that, or they place a different value or meaning on that, right? And so this is why it's so individual and so part of each person's.
Does that exist?
Template.
Are there women who like to be ejaculated on?
Well, I like it.
All right.
Take that.
Yes.
Boom.
Kristin, did you?
Sure. Nope.
In your experience, that does exist.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There are people that like everything, John.
Okay. No, it's good.
We're a wide and diverse creation.
And can I say, I just want to piggyback on with what Margie just said. I want to emphasize how important it is to just take time. Let it be something that is an adventure. It doesn't need to be go to Pornhub tonight. Like that, actually, I would really maybe say pump the brakes a bit, and just be actively working on these skills of even being able to talk about it, especially, and I'm really speaking to those that are partnered, just so it's just not drinking from the fire hose. This might be a bad analogy to use, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with just saying, this is something we're kind of chatting about right now.
Right.
Okay. We might decide not to. That's cool too.
Okay, I love that. Really quickly, I kind of want to just finish talking about this one subject, and then we're going to wrap up for today and finish, and continue next week on Valentine's Day. I think it's a great topic for Valentine's Day, don't you think?
Great topic.
Yeah. So I have two more questions. Number one is, what are some sort of channels or products around erotica that you recommend? Are they DVDs you have to buy? Is it stuff you can download on iTunes? Just shout out 2 or 3 resources that you would consider to be ethical, high quality, effective with clients that you've worked with. If anything comes to mind, because I would think you'd have some recommendations maybe.
Well, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It's the sex education film one, Kristin, but I'd have to go look it up.
You
Sex
can
Ed
look it
Films.
up. Yeah. What's it called?
Films.
Sex film. It's hang on one second. I'll get it for you.
So there's that one. And then I think that if you want to start out even like using something like Pornhub, if you search for like Tantra or spa, you'll get kind of themes that are a little bit more, relaxing and not quite as, hump and pump type of themes.
Right.
Okay.
So you might get some of that, but did you find the one I'm
looking for it, but
it's a paid subscription.
Yeah, it's a call.
Okay, it sounds like you guys don't have vendors on the top of your mind.
No, I do want to make
Kristin,
a plug
please.
for the reading material. That there's books like My Secret Garden by Nancy Friday, where it's actually qualified under feminist. It just explores women's fantasies. And I've had quite a few clients that have really enjoyed just hearing other women's experiences of what they enjoy fantasizing about in order to increase sexual desire. So that, it doesn't have to be a film. It doesn't have to be visual.
Okay.
In fact,
I was going to say, actually, for a lot of women that I know, as they sort of just begin, literature is a really comfortable, because it's private, it's kind of to yours, and it's a great way to sort of open up and begin exploring that way.
The Outlander is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Is that a book series? What is that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's now a TV series as well. And it is also very hot.
Yes.
Yes. But not what I would call, rated X
right.
So.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to ask you guys to send us some links to just a couple, providers of erotica, or let's just say ethical, effective porn that people could begin with if they're interested. The last question I have is, how would you recommend a couple start? So there's a couple where they're kind of open to this opportunity, but they've been very conservative in the past. What are some first steps that a couple might use to incorporate erotica or porn into the bedroom in a way to where it will feel like a good experience and not a bad experience?
Okay, I did find it's sexsmartfilms.com.
Sexsmartfilms.com.
Yeah, and this is maybe going to speak to my answer to your question.
Okay.
It's really just wrapping up a lot of what we've said. Just start with being okay with this is an educational process. Let's just start getting the language to even talk about this stuff. Be scrappy with finding resources from people that you trust their opinions on, and just make it part of your dialogue often to start getting better at talking about this. So, I mean, yeah.
And I'm even being more, and that's great, but I'm even being more explicit. You're two in the bedroom. What, you bring a laptop at the foot of your bed?
I see.
Like, what is, like, talk about that first experience and what are some ways to
break
try
it
that?
down, y'all. Break it down bit by bit.
Yes.
Like somebody somebody does homework and comes with something that worked for them private, and then they show it to their partner and say, hey, this really was exciting for me. Can we watch this? And like, you're both facing, like, can you just talk people over that initial hump of like, I don't even know where to start?
Well, so I'll just say that I think a lot of times what can be a really helpful approach is, I say, to stay in a mindful mindset. And really what I'm saying with that is non-judgmental of whatever is showing up for you and whatever is showing up for your partner, and to check in often. So one of you may be very aroused and being like, wow, this is really exciting. And one of you may be struggling with some sense of fear or even disgust, but you don't want to necessarily let your partner know that. It's really important to just be able to say, okay, let's press pause and let's just check in. Let's just check in, and to be able to hold space for both of those experiences. It might be that both of us are uncomfortable and we're deciding to stop at this point. It may be that one of us is uncomfortable, one of us isn't. And it's probably, we can, okay, so do we want to try again and see? Or if the person is really too uncomfortable, it's okay to stop then too. I think where people get really hung up is with results. So, oh, that didn't go the way I had hoped, right? Oh, what a disaster. Or I let them down, or I let myself down. Or we really want to stay away from that, because anything that you're doing, even if you decide it's not for you, is really part of an exciting new process for you as a couple. And we really want to celebrate that. So really trying to even make space, like, oh, there's a part of my brain that's really disappointed. Okay, I can say that, but that's different than saying I'm really disappointed and now I'm going to give you the cold treatment for the rest of the night, right? Or give myself, anxiety. So it's like, I can make space for negative emotions or negative feelings without it overrunning the whole experience.
Got it.
And then we can like high five each other, and like, we did good. Like, look at us. Like, this is really uncomfortable, and we can be proud of ourselves and really be. So that's, I guess, if I could say one thing, that's what I would say, is having that mindful mindset.
Right.
And I like, also, I'm a fan of alternating kind of who's holding the reins, so maybe one date night, one brings something that they'd like to experience together, and then talk about what you liked about what you didn't afterwards. And maybe if you were just neutral, and then the next experience the other partner, because we're also very likely, because every couple has a desire discrepancy, every single couple. And so to be able to, it can also be beneficial for the person who's typically a lower desire partner to to have the chance to say, this is what I think I want to try. This maybe is what I want to do tonight, and there's also a lot of opportunity to practice non-judgment toward the self and also the partner. It's just an adventure. It's just new experiences. Let's not put more meaning on it than that.
Okay.
I love that. So even being clear about the intention, it isn't about the end. We're being curious. We're trying. We're trying.
I could care
things.
less if anybody has an orgasm. I could care less if you got to a certain point or not. What I care about mostly is that you tried anything. Like, that's phenomenal. Or that you talked about trying something.
Right.
Yes.
And again, in your guys' experience, your gal's experience, you have found with your clients that bringing quality erotica or porn into, let's just say, the bedroom has for some couples increased their positive experiences around sexuality. Is that?
For some.
I would agree. For some. Yeah. Not for all.
And then for others, has it gone badly and been something that was a bad experience?
I think what I have found with my couples who are willing to at least have a different conversation about this is that they're able to at least say, okay, well, I can understand now, like maybe a different framing, but I'm still pretty comfortable with this not being for me. And so it's almost like an ownership then of authenticity versus, oh, it's the church telling me it was bad, or it was my mother telling me it was bad, or it was the feminist agenda telling me it was bad. Like, I'm deciding for myself, this is not okay with me, but I gave it a shot, and I was willing to like think about it differently or see it from your perspective. And I can understand why maybe for you it is erotic, and maybe I don't need to be as threatened by that anymore as I used to be, because I'm not going to buy into that script that I need to be the all and be all, especially if I'm the woman. And I think that's a very successful ending to that experiment.
Got it.
It almost reminds me of, I mean, it may sound silly, but it almost reminds me of like your diet, what you eat. That for some people, it's just like, you know, I tried it and it's not my favorite, and I probably wouldn't have it every day or even every week. But for other people, I mean, is it as simple as that? Like for some people, they love it. It really works for them.
It really is.
Yep.
It really is.
It's a good
but
analogy.
imagine if every time you had anchovies, John would be like, oh, I'm not enough for you, and I don't know why you like anchovies, and I don't like anchovies, and I just can't believe that you would, and
we're not a good partnership.
And we're not a good partnership, and you don't love me because I would really prefer to have, you know, and so talking about.
Well, how about anchovies is infidelity, right? You're betraying me because you like anchovies.
Look at that me that's attached to that. That'd be, ugh.
Right. Instead of Al Vernacchio's approach for Goodness Sucks, which is a great resource, and he did a TED Talk on comparing sexuality to pizza versus the bases, which really is pretty much the woman is the field and you're playing the bases. Right?
Right.
In essence, that's kind of the script that we've all come from. And he's like, but pizza is like, well, I want, you know, pepperoni. Well, I want pineapple. Well, can we half it? Or what kind of crust do you want? You have this whole conversation before you even order, and nobody's threatened, and you figure it out, and you enjoy your pizza together, and much better metaphor.
All right. Well, I have been interested. I think we've had some of the fewer comments on Facebook Live than any other episode. I do wonder, you know, Facebook's interesting because your name is attached to it. And so, you guys are sex therapists within a Mormon context. Would you have expected that we would get less Facebook comments around the discussion of sexuality than other topics? Is that what you would have predicted?
I see it go either way. It's so unpredictable because it depends on the feed. Like if it's within one group.
Well, but at the same time, this is like, I can't tell you how many times people beg me to come and do materials on sex, and then I'll do it, and 20 people show up. And Amy Grubbs or Kristin is telling me, don't put sex in the title. I'm like, really? Like, we can't put sex in the title? Like, that's where we're at? But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It really, sexuality cuts to the chorus parts of our egos.
Right.
And for me to feel like I'm not a good lover, or my partner feels like I'm not a good lover, or something along those lines, it's so intrinsically painful that, you know, I get it. I mean, it's hard. It's hard stuff to talk about.
Okay. So on the flip side, we have received some comments, which we're grateful for. We had a good number of viewers, listeners, so we want to thank everyone for joining us on Facebook Live. My guess is there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this sort of in the privacy of their own mobile device, where it's not viewed on Facebook, that they're actually engaging and participating. And we want to welcome and thank those people who tune in as well. We did receive several emails. We want to thank those who send us emails. We're saving them all, so we're going to include them in future episodes. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on that for a second. But so as we kind of wrap up this episode, maybe there's just a few things we'll end with. Actually, we thought it would be fun to leave today with sort of a segment called Try This at Home. Now, Margie, I don't know if you prepared something for this episode. You didn't.
I was going to ask them.
Yeah. So,
'Cause I was
so Natasha and Kristin, if you were to give homework to our listeners for something to try, is there something that either of you would offer as sort of a fun little piece of homework for our listeners or viewers to try before we come back next time? Put you on the spot. Give us some homework.
I could definitely give homework.
All right, Natasha, you give one piece of homework. It sounds like this may be more fun homework than what we're used to.
Do try this at home.
Do try this at home. So Natasha, give our listeners one piece of homework, and Kristin, you too.
Okay, well, I think a very simple one that doesn't require even a partner, although you can do it as a partnership, is the mirror exercise. I think that it would be really a wonderful exercise to sit down with yourself in a comfortable location, whether you're male or female, and take a mirror down to your genitalia and look at yourself, move parts around, and really sit with yourself. You know, we've had such a dirty, gross relationship with our genitalia, and these are really phenomenal body structures of ours, and very sensitive body structures of ours, and quite phenomenal body structures of ours that are equipped to do a variety of wonderful, amazing things. So could you first of all be mindful of any negative energy that you're holding, and then could you make space for that and just own that, again, being non-judgmental, like, yeah, there's a part of me that doesn't like looking at myself in this way. And then could you also offer your genitalia some well-deserved love and admiration?
Does that have positive outcome, Natasha, in your experience when people do this exercise? What positive things have you seen come out of that exercise for people in a practical way?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, it's very empowering. And I think especially for women, most of us don't have a super big visual relationship with our genitalia the way that men maybe have since growing up with erections, making it pretty viable. So, so I think it's pretty empowering. I think that any time that we're willing to cognitively look and feel differently about something, that's at the heart of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And maybe possibly having a different meaning attributed to certain things. So that's at the heart of most of what therapy is about. And also the mindful piece, right? Like, so that I can be accepting of negative and positive emotions or things without being judgmental, like, oh, I'm such a loser that I'm having this feeling that's negative. Natasha said I should love my genitalia. I'm such a loser. No, I don't want that. I want to be like, ew, okay, I just said ew, isn't that interesting? And that's really powerful. And now I'm going to wonder what other feelings I can have. Like wow, or cool, yeah, or like wow, like that, or right? Cool, or even as I'm saying that, it doesn't feel very honest, but at least I'm saying it. So again, just being very non-judgmental of whatever shows up. Love it. Whatever shows up. Love it. Kristin, how about you? What's a piece of homework you're going to give us?
My first thought was have an orgasm. But then I thought about it a little more. And something I'd like to suggest for everyone to try tonight is to identify one thing that you're going to work on to empower your sexual self, to reclaim that authority. I mean, for some ideas might be to make sure if you're female bodied, have the best kind of lube that works the best for your body. For some, it might be to have an orgasm. For some, it might be to work on their relationship with their genitalia, like Natasha just described, or reframe thinking errors. We're loaded with them coming from where we're coming from. And so to identify some of your biggest bullies that continue to show up and start working on that one tonight. Today, beautiful. Now.
Yeah.
All right.
Love it.
All right. A few final listener comments. Melissa wrote, great healthy discussion. Thank you in the panel. I loved it. Gracie wrote, this was awesome. Sherry responded to my comment about there being less Facebook Live comments. She wrote, hey, this was great. Just listening, absorbing. Loved you thanks for the information and being blunt and real. Kim writes, thank you. Jesse wrote, came across at the end. We'll be going back and watching it all. So some good, really good positive feedback from our listeners. And I feel the same way. Natasha and Kristin, we think you guys are courageous and brilliant and thoughtful and wise and sensitive and lovely.
All that and more.
Worthy.
Worthy,
lovely.
outstanding. How about fabulous? Not worthy. Kristin, if somebody wants to hire you or work with you or learn more, just tell us a little bit about how they can reach out to you.
You can go to my website. It's intimateconnectionscounseling.com. That's where they'll be able to find if I have openings for clients right now.
Okay.
Or Facebook. Kristin Marie, certified sex therapist on Facebook is another place you can go.
Excellent. All right, Kristin, thank you for joining us on Mormon Transitions.
Thank you.
Please come back next week.
Next week.
And other times.
Cool.
Natasha, if people want to learn about your new business, talk about that a bit more and how that works.
Yeah, so it's Symmetry Solutions. It's at symmetrysouls.com, SOLS, so symmetrysols.com. And every single provider is working under my supervision because I'm really to the point where I can't take on all the clients that want to see me, or you offer evenings or weekends, or my rates are too high for some people. So I really wanted to make some of these services that I offer available to a variety of people, especially faith transitioning folks who are struggling with many, many issues, right? Mixed faith families, sexuality, coming out, whether you're LGBT or things. So I have specifically chosen people for all those different reasons, and they're all under my supervision. So it means we meet weekly. So you kind of get me, but indirectly, as far as working with your particular provider, because they'll be presenting cases, and I'm offering all of my wisdom of 21 years working in this field to some of these providers who also love working with these particular issues as well. So I'm super excited about it and hope that people will find it a resource. There's other resources obviously as well, but I felt like this was really important for me to spend some time offering.
Any other podcasts you want to plug?
Mormon Sex Info. So definitely want to plug that. Mormon Mental Health. That's really good. I just did a self-injury release with Self-Injury Awareness Day coming out March 1st. That's super important and super common in Mormon land. So
Meaning
really,
cutting sort of things?
Okay. Cutting, burning,
right.
Pulling out your hair, picking at scabs, all kinds of ways that people self-injure. It's not necessarily suicidal behavior, but it can be quite damaging to their self-identity. And so great podcast. Ruth Halstead did a great job being interviewed for that.
Beautiful. Okay, ladies, beautiful. Thank you again, both of you, for joining us. This conversation is only going to continue a week from now, February 14th at noon in Mountain Time. We're going to continue this conversation. We haven't even really scratched the surface. So do your homework, and we're going to come back next week. Please email us at mormontransitions@gmail.com if you have comments, if you like something, if you didn't like something, if you want us to cover other topics, if you have questions, we will incorporate them into the show. So please do that. Please, if you have ideas for other needs or concerns, other topics you want us to cover on other days, if you want to volunteer to be a panelist, if you want to volunteer someone else to be a panelist, we would love any of that feedback at mormontransitions@gmail.com. Please support our work. I'm going to mention this at the beginning and end of every episode. Your donations make all of this possible. They keep the Open Stories Foundation alive. They support Amy Grubbs, who is our Director of Operations, who behind the scenes makes all of this possible. We have volunteers like Shandy, who we want to start paying, people like that, but we can't do it unless people donate. It's all tax deductible, and it goes to very worthy causes, and we just need your support. So please, if you're benefiting from this, kind of don't just consume it without supporting it. Donations as little as $10 or $20 a month can literally keep these sorts of things alive. So I'm going to make that plug every time. Thanks again, everyone who joined us, again to Amy and Shandy that make this possible behind the scenes. to all the other Open Stories Foundation podcasts like Mormon Matters, A Thoughtful Faith, Mormon Transitions, that's what this is, Mormon Mental Health, and to the Open Stories Foundation board that makes all this possible. Thanks everyone for tuning in, mostly for the listeners and viewers and supporters, and we'll check you guys again in 1 week. Check out mormontransitions.org. We love you guys.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
And thanks, Margie.
Bye.
Thanks, Margie. You're
Bye.
beautiful.
Thanks, John.
Let's do some homework.
Let's do some homework.
Report back.
All right, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks again.